We now return to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute, the radio show discussing the honest truth about Illinois policy and politics. Here's AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with Pat Hughes, co-founder of the Illinois Opportunity Project, on this edition of Illinois Rising. And Pat, we discussed this briefly on the last edition of this program, this legislation sponsored by Anna Moeller, who's a Democrat from Elgin, that pushed through the House easily, that would prevent employers in Illinois, prohibit, that's how they'd prevent, from asking prospective employees their salary history. And the theory behind this is to say, well, this will protect women from being discriminated against in the workforce with respect to compensation, if you even accept the premise that that occurs with any regularity, which I do not.
I do not accept that premise either. You talked about this last week, Dan, where, employers are bottom line motivated, right? They want to make as much money as possible. And if they could have a qualified workforce for 70 cents on the dollar, 75 cents on the dollar, that's the workforce that they'd employ because they'd make so much more money. And this is just more political grandstanding. What disturbs me, we talked a little bit about this last week, is sort of the intrusion on, private conversations and coordination between an employer and employee. Everybody's free to choose how they want to go about doing this. If you want to give your information, give it. If you don't, go to find an employer who's not looking for it. But the overwhelming support that this kind of nonsense gets in our General Assembly, even amongst people that in my private life I've supported, is a little distressing.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, Milton Friedman had a great riff on this, as he had a great riff on so many topics. The whole idea here is, if there's discrimination occurring, do you want to punish the discriminator or reward him? So if you have two men operating a shoe store and one man says, I'm only going to hire men as my sales associates, and the other guy says, I'm going to hire the best qualified person, the person who's going to sell the most shoes. So one guy's got men and women work for him. The other guy's got only men working for him. And you're punishing the non-discriminating employer who has a meritocratic business because you're putting the same mandate on both. Don't you want to encourage the meritocratic business owner to outcompete, which he would, because he's hiring based on quality, not based on a non-behavioral, non-performance matter like gender? You'd want to incentivize and encourage and punish through the marketplace the person who discriminates. Friedman famously said in response to a woman who asked this question, I'm on your side, you're not.
Do you think that
you're not on your side?
Do you think that Anna Moeller knows who Milton Friedman is, Dan? Because I do not.
No, I don't, and I'm not sure that she would follow the logic of what I just tried to explain, but I know at least one legislator can. He's State Representative Peter Breen, Republican from Lombard. He opposed the legislation, calling it one of the stupidest bills the General Assembly has considered, and that is a strong statement considering the number of stupid bills the General Assembly has considered and moved, like trampoline safety and regulation of antique mopeds and so forth. So we're pleased to be joined by State Representative Peter Breen to discuss this in further detail. Peter, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Glad to be here. And I did say it was the stupidest up to that time during that week, because we actually then did consider some real doozies after this bill.
Sure, right. I mean, you don't want to use such superlatives because your colleagues will always one-up you in terms of stupidity. So that's fair. You got to be measured with those descriptions. So why did you find this to be counterproductive if the goal in Illinois is to create more job opportunities?
Well, and let me set the stage for you. This past week, last week in the Illinois House, Speaker Madigan changed the debate rules multiple times, so just the opening that you just did, you would have been called time on. You could not have had that discussion because we were on a short clock, 2 minutes per representative, and then actually they changed the rules again, so that the way the body is set up, we're not even set up to have these intelligent discussions. Now, with that as background, the representative who was the sponsor of this bill was asked numerous questions about it. Why did you use this word? What's this? What's that? No substantive answers at all. it was really, it was striking. It was something where I was listening to this debate. I wasn't going to get up and say anything. I had some other bills that I dealt with this week as the floor leader on, but I was listening to this, and I was reading the text of the bill, and as someone myself who started and run small nonprofits, which are little small businesses, I'm looking at this going, I don't even know how I would set a salary consistent with this new bill that they're trying to put together. So that was really where I came from. The issue is this: equal pay is kind of we all know that women in general make about 75% of what men do, but when you control for experience and talent, there's a much, much smaller gap. It's somewhere in the 3 to 5% range. And the problem is there's no study that shows that gap, the 3 to 5%, is based on bias. We just don't know what it is. So the idea that's been going around the country is that it's wage and salary history, that maybe that's the secret sauce. And so that was what Massachusetts enacted that as a law. Our business community in Illinois was willing to compromise and say, you know what, we'll disclaim asking for wage and salary history. They said it, and frankly, the Republicans said, well, if the business community's fine with it, we this compromise measure as a show of good faith, we were fine with that. The problem is this bill that came forward is essentially said every single difference between any two employees had to be justified in a 3-factor test. And in other words, so for a small nonprofit, you're going to have to explain, why does Bob make $15 an hour and Sam makes $17 an hour? You've got to have business necessity and all that. And if you're in any way off, lawyers can come in, they get attorney fee recoveries, they can sue you for the difference, and tie you up in court.
So this is just a sop to the trial lawyers.
It appeared to me, and I'm somebody who's in the courtroom pretty regularly, so when I see something, when I see some language like I saw in this bill, and my little antenna go up and I go, hey, hang on, this is something. Here's the thing, in most small businesses, which is where all the jobs are being created, there aren't elaborate salary scales and things like that are in they're kind of standard in either a union organization or a much larger corporation. And this bill, and remember, this equal pay amendment would apply to employers down to size 1.
So Peter, if that's the case, and you've got property taxes, you've got worker compensation costs that are too high, you've got businesses fleeing the state, and now this is just yet another regulation that, like you said, could really hamper a smaller organization, then why are you standing with only 24 members of your legislative body? In other words, I get that you weren't able to debate it because Mike Madigan cut the rules, but aren't these things that, at least on the Republican side, are being discussed over and over and over again? And shouldn't people in our position, voters, taxpayers, be able to rely on your caucus members to understand that that's what's happening and to vote against it?
Yeah, and in the short 2-minute period I had to say it, I think I actually said the governors of our neighboring states are doing a little happy dance that we are even considering this bill. Look, I can't speak for everybody else. I know, at least in some of my conversations, that once the numbers, folks just jumped on it because they were afraid of being accused of not being supportive of equal pay.
Yes, exactly. Profiles and courage. I'm afraid of being called a name, therefore I'm going to do the bidding of the left. It's compelling stuff. I've got an idea for legislation. I want to see if maybe you can get some of your colleagues who think this is a good idea to sponsor it. We need occupational fatality equity. Mark Perry, who is an economics professor at University of Michigan, makes this point every year on this topic of pay equity. The top 10 most dangerous U.S. occupations in the country are all male-dominated. Logging, fishing, pilots, roofers, refuse collectors, farmers, ranchers, all are at least 75% men. And the result is that in terms of fatalities on the job, it's 12-1 male to female. That's as of 2014. And so we need to force more women into logging and fishing and other dangerous jobs so they are killed on the job at the exact same rate as men, because we need equity across the board, don't we?
Well,
Can I get you want me? Can I introduce it? Can I get you as a co-sponsor?
Yeah, that one might be a little tough.
Right.
I would say that trying to figure out, I mean, under this new bill, you'd have to look at the differential between the males and the females in logging and see, make sure that it's,
right.
You've got a 3-factor test and all of that. I mean, it just, I don't know. I mean, look, this was, we had, this was a long week, the last week at the Illinois House, and it was, the other side was, we debated reclaiming lost life insurance benefits for 2 hours, and then we had short debate on this extremely important anti-business regulation.
Well, it's always a long week in Illinois, Peter. All the weeks are long here, well, at least when it comes to the discussions of public policy. He is State Representative Peter Breen, Republican from Lombard, who correctly described this as the stupidest legislation we were talking about up to that point. And it's since been eclipsed in the minds of many, but up to that point, that was a fair description. Peter, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.